I know the word has gotten around town that the thespian extraordinaire, John Canning, is who we all know has been a hipster since birth. He's going to give a very, very brief lecture on his life and times as a hipster from virtually when he was in the womb up until today. And he's also going to deliver a very special message about the state of hipsterism in society today and the crisis that it's in. And so, without any further ado, I'd like everybody to give a warm welcome to the most famous hipster in Seacliff, John Canning.
Thank you, Mike. You're right up here.
There's a microphone, nice and loud, okay? And,
absolutely.
There's a camera, and there's a camera. Great, thank you.
Mike has introduced me as the ultimate hipster. I know, looks can be deceiving. I can still remember my mother passing me to my father moments after my birth. Our eyes locked in mutual curiosity and affection. I eventually broke the silence and said, "Daddy-o?" Yes, I was something of an early developer. But instead of beaming with pride, he looked aghast and quickly handed me back to my mother. "My God, Martha," he uttered, "it's a hipster." Hipster prosecution and persecution is a most serious problem in our society. And why? Because they choose the taste of micro-brewed Tibetan lager over Schlitz? Or a partially decaf soy latte with minimal foam and lava chips over the pedestrian cup of joe? To what extremes should they go to be accepted by the mainstream? Go forth sporting a mullet? The haters gonna hate. Rest in peace, Tupac. You too, Biggie. That's right. I didn't choose the hipster life. The hipster life chose me. A further example of this crisis is an email I received in response to a recent article I wrote on a United Nations blog regarding the lack of craft beers available to third world countries. And I quote, "Dear beer bitch, you are an incredibly nauseating, self-absorbed, narcissistic blowhard." Blowhard? He then goes on to say, "For your own safety, I suggest you haul your pathetic hipster ass back to Williamsburg and never again venture away from that loathsome, delusional habitat from where you have morphed." It's Park Slope. What the hell does he know? But in all fairness to the ranting, raving majority of that great unwashed out there who abhor us so for our innate ability to turn deplorable thrift shop rags into catwalk chic and totally master the art of self-importance, I say to you, I truly feel your pain. Just don't take it out on us. But there's something I want to make clear here. Today's hipster wasn't always the prototype of the edgy, wanton arm candy that you see before you right now. Our rich, rugged history spans generations, from Kerouac to Cobain to Canning, from the Beats to grunge to this. As a senior member of the hipster elite, I am a seasoned veteran of the countless cultural coups that have led to our present exalted status. Way back in '65, I embraced the mod movement with open arms, even though it was looked upon with disdain by everyone else in my preschool. Soon after, I courageously championed the new look of the Nehru jacket. Goodness, what was I thinking? You see, my message here is that we really aren't so different from each other. Me and all of you lovely suburban bourgeoisie. I mean, we all want Justin Bieber dead, right? There's some common ground. I thought perhaps by tracing the roots of hipsterdom, you might gain a new respect at who we are and where we came from. We are the new breed of Burroughs, Cassidy, and Ginsberg. My dedication to the movement led me to read Naked Lunch numerous times, which was followed by a prolonged period of electroshock treatments. But William S. Burroughs was probably the most brilliant junkie the literary world has known. Now that I think of it, we could also take credit for the heroin chic period. And the art and music scene, Pollock, Mapplethorpe, Warhol, the Velvet Underground, for God's sake. Why, one time in Frisco, I saw the Doors and met them backstage. It would be impossible to explain what it was like to speak with Jim Morrison for 5 hours after I downed 2 tabs of acid. I don't want to brag, but it wasn't a coincidence that Jim started work on the Strange Days album soon after. And don't think we didn't have a hand in the punk rock movement either, despite what those angry, skanky reptilians with the awful haircuts had to say back then. Their animosities were simply fueled by the constraints and pressures put upon them by the establishment, or what I and my African-American brothers simply call the man. Despite the efforts of the man to keep us down, punk spread across numerous continents. From our own backyard, we produced the Ramones, Patti Smith, Iggy Pop, and the Stooges, and perhaps the greatest American punk band no one ever heard of, Prison Sex. Yes, that's really the name of the band. Go ahead and Google it. And from across the pond, there was the Buzzcocks, Ian Drury, and the Blockheads, the Clash, indeed the only band that ever mattered, the Sniveling Shits, the Vibrators, and of course the Sex Pistols. Rest in peace, Sid and Nancy. You see, they were the hipsters of the 70s, as were Hemingway and Fitzgerald of the 30s, and Cab Calloway and the Zoot Suit Hepcats of the 40s. And as any self-respecting hipster of the 50s will tell you, Little Richard was the real Elvis. But of course, that's besides the point. My message is to ask you to show tolerance to today's hipsters, even as they multiply like hybrid cockroaches on augmented fertility drugs while driving up real estate prices in all the outer boroughs. Well, except for Staten Island, of course. And the reason I ask is they really aren't completely responsible for their arrogant, self-centered, pouty, putrid behavior. After an in-depth study on the subject, I have concluded that the real cause for today's hipster problem goes back a generation, approximately to the year 1977. Most parents of today's hipsters were hipsters themselves in '77, and things were going along pretty sweet with the Yankees winning their first World Series in 15 years. The Talking Heads had arrived, Hunter S. Thompson made the cover of Rolling Stone, and Billy Carter was cashing in on his bro being the president by selling millions of six-packs of his very own beer. And then, bam, it happened. Disco. It was a bad music apocalypse, and no one was spared. My research shows it decimated the creative and hipster community, which were one in the same at the time. Millions of 20-somethings simply didn't know how to cope with the daily onslaught of ABBA, KC and the Sunshine Band, and Barry White. No, wait a minute. My bad. I totally take that back about Barry White. Barry White was a god. What the hell was I thinking? Rest in peace, Barry. So, there were millions of young, lost souls out there trying to survive a musical holocaust with only an occasional taste of Leonard Skinner or Meatloaf to keep them culturally nourished. So they did the only thing they could do. They compartmentalized disco permanently, thus creating a gene passed along to their offspring, who now, secretly troubled by this invisible beat, wander the streets of Bushwick, Fort Greene, Red Hook, Prospect Park, Prospect Heights, Dumbo, Gowanus, and Clinton Hill like some trendy alien automatons reeking of superficiality and entitlement. God, they make me want to throw up. Excuse me. So you see, I stand before you today to ask that you show compassion, and by all means restraint, the next time you encounter a hipster, in the hopes that one day soon, science will find a way to alter, if only slightly, their behavior, thus enabling humankind to move forward in unison once again. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, very much.